Hi everybody, Dr. Stringer back again. We are on to Module 15 this week, our very last module of the semester. I'm coming to you here from my office, and today we're going to talk about technology and criminal justice policy, which is a very interesting topic, and it is the last topic that we will talk about for the semester. So today you had two articles to read. One was in the University of Chicago Law School Journal of Economics and Law by Amanda Agan, and the other is in Criminal Justice Review, which for those of you that don't know is actually housed at Georgia State right down the street, and it was by Griffin and Miller. It was on child abduction and Amber Alerts. So I hope that you all didn't have too much trouble reading those. I know that some of them have some mathematical formulas and things like that you probably found to be quite challenging to understand for those of you that are not statistics majors. But hopefully you can still get the gist of what they're trying to say, and that's what I usually tell people is just ignore the formulas. You don't have to worry about it. Unless you're trying to really critique their methodological approach, you don't have to understand all of that in order to get the main gist of what they're talking about and what their conclusions are, because they're usually pretty good about telling you what the conclusions are. At least they should be, without having to understand the formulas. So, as we talk about policies, one of the big ones that we're going to talk about this week is going to be sex offender legislation. And so there's been violent crime control and law enforcement acts that every state must maintain a sex offender registry, for those of you that don't know. Several pieces of legislation have also been enacted to influence this system. Notify the public on certain offenders, restrictions on residences, punishment for offenders who fail to register, things like that. The national fingerprint and DNA databases, which we've already talked about, being APHIS and CODIS database. And so these people are required to submit their DNA to these things, as well as their fingerprints, which are probably already on record when they got arrested. So some other things, that we'll talk about are Megan's Law. These laws make information available to the public regarding registered sex offenders, and this is what you see when you see these registries in each state. But there is no effect on recidivism and no specific deterrent effect of these. They're more just for public knowledge. So Jessica's Law and the Adam Walsh Act, both about monitoring and punishing sex offenders. No encouraging evidence that these policies reduce crime or sex offenses either, which is interesting. And here's just a look at the Georgia Sex Offender Registry. And there's the URL up there for those of you that want to go and look at it. And I looked at the Georgia one not too long ago, and we actually have a few people that live. I think one person lives a little bit north of campus, and there was someone else that was a little bit west of campus. But you can go on there and look at these things, and you can actually see their pictures on there too of all the registered sex offenders and their residences in the state of Georgia and surrounding campus and things like that. So those of you that go on to purchase homes and things like that, and maybe you grow up or maybe you already have children, these might be some things that you want to look into before deciding where you want to live at. Yes. So here is just a map of the Georgia sex offenders, the number of sex offenders that are living in each county in the state of Georgia. And if you look, I don't know if you guys can see my arrow there, but in Cobb County we have about 480. In Fulton it's 1,500, and Cherokee is only 200. And it seems like the further out you go, you get less and less. And then Fulton County seems to have the most. Then again, Fulton has a very high population too, because the population of Atlanta is pretty large. And so when you look at out-of-state offenders, total sex offenders, there's a total of 25,000 living in the state of Georgia. 3,900 of them are incarcerated, so we don't really have to worry about them too much. At least as us being people that are not incarcerated. I don't know how much the people that are incarcerated are worried about the sex offenders while they're in prison, but that's another issue altogether. So, sex offender registries have been critiqued by several different scholars, and the one article that you're having to read here, the Agan article, brings up some issues, and so there's several problems with the system, and so these systems cannot contain incomplete and incorrect and outdated information sometimes. You make it a law that the sex offenders are required to notify them whenever they change their address and things like that, but that doesn't mean that they always do that. And it can be very challenging if a sex offender decides to move to find out that they've moved if they decide not to tell anyone. And of course, they're under supervision and things like that, but these are not always end-all be-all databases that have everything correct. And there's just a quote in here that I put from the GBI database. It says, as the information is provided by other agencies and entities and is continuously changing, the GBI makes no promise or any express or implied guarantee concerning the accuracy of this information. So, as we've talked about before with other technologies, you get garbage in, you get garbage out. If your data is bad, any information that you get from that data can be challenging and misleading and may not lead you down the correct path to your conclusions. There's different laws regarding residency restrictions, or modern day banishment. For those of you that read that book, Banishment, I want to think, who wrote, I want to say Vitale, but it might have been Catherine Beckett. Anyway, and then there's other ethical issues with this. A few years ago there was a presentation. This guy had, I think it was Chicago or, actually no, it was Albany, New York, and he had this map of Albany, and he was looking at all the different residency restrictions on sex offenders, which you're not allowed to live anywhere within 100 yards of a school, churches, things like that. And if you look at a densely populated area like Albany, it's really, really hard to find anywhere to live that's not within certain yards or feet of one of these establishments, and so that can be quite challenging to find places to live. Of course, most people don't really care, and most people think, well, if you didn't do the crime, you wouldn't have to do the time, so to speak. So these are things to think about too. They're looking at different enforcement issues with this. There's a few things that still remain unclear. So what do we do with these offenders? Who's responsible for policing them? Probably the police, right? Or perhaps their probation, parole officer, or something like that. Should sex offenders be monitored long term? Or do they just remain on the list indefinitely? I think I told you guys too, when we think about the label of sex offender, right? You often think about, someone that's, committed this heinous rape or child molestation or something like that. But one thing to think about as you guys, look at these things, you can be in there for, statutory rape. There's been some people that, the person was a senior in high school and he was 18, and, his girlfriend happened to be 17, and, that's technically statutory rape in many states. There's other issues with, maybe someone urinating in public, something like that. Some people like to engage in interesting activities voluntarily and, consensually on the beach or other places that might be considered public. But all of these things would fall under that umbrella of sex offenders. So it's an interesting thing to think about, especially as criminologists. Do we want to lump the people that had to go to the bathroom and they peed behind a dumpster in the same group and in the same registry with the child molesters and rapists and things like that? So that's something to think about too. But anyway, So it's a fear without a function, is what Agan kind of gets at, and he's asking these things as kind of his research questions. What is the goal of these registries? Is it to keep the public safe? And so his research questions are, do sex offender registry laws change sex offense rates? Do these laws lead to lower sex offender recidivism rates? Or do areas with more registered sex offenders experience more sexual offenses? And so these are his basic research questions that he's come up with as he's formulating his hypotheses and figuring out how he's going to go about this study. And so testing the effectiveness of sex offender registries, he uses state panel data. It's longitudinal data, which is included when the registry was created, when the registry was placed online, the size of the registry, arrest information, and of course recidivism data. And if you look at those the lines in the different graphs that he has there with the things over time, you'll see that it demarcates. The line is like when the registry was created, when it was placed online, different things like that over time, to see within this interrupted time series analysis whether things changed, whether the recidivism changed or the levels of sex offenders changed once the registry was put in place or once it was placed online and things like that. So to test whether areas with more sex offenders experience more sex offenders, they looked at Washington, D.C. So it's a location crime data and D.C. sex offender registry information to do this. So the results do not support the effectiveness of sex offender registries. There's not a significant decrease in the rate of sex offenses after the implementation of the registry. Sex offender registries do not lead to a significant decrease in recidivism either. So the sex offender concentration cannot predict sexual abuse in these locations. So largely, this is rather unsupportive of sex offender registries reducing sex offenses and recidivism. So, based on this article, there isn't much evidence to support the effectiveness of sex offender registries. These registries do a better job evoking public fear than they do actually protecting citizens. Are there any other technology-based policies that are crime control theater? And I think that's what we're getting at when we look at maybe the Amber Alert issues. So, the sex offender registry may not, have any effect on recidivism and things like that, but it does tend to generate more fear, or perhaps less fear, depending on, whether you have a person that's on the registry living nearby or whether you don't. But the thing to think about, too, is, when looking at say you look at the sex offender registry and you find that there's no registered sex offenders living near you. That makes you feel safe, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not any sex offenders living near you. It just means that there's not any sex offenders who have been caught living near you. So you should kind of take that with a grain of salt. And then back to, my previous, talking about these different minor offenses that you can, maybe not minor, but less serious offenses that you can get on this registry for. Just because you have someone that's on this registry living in your neighborhood, well, maybe this guy was, 20 years old and got caught urinating behind a dumpster outside of a bar, when he was 20 years old. Does that mean that this guy is, a big threat to the security and the safety of the neighborhood in the same way that you would think about, a child molester or rapist or something like that? Probably not. He might be at risk of going and urinating behind your trash can or something like that, but I would imagine if this person is much older, then they probably would not be doing that anymore. But so these things can be a little bit misleading, and I think this is what I want you guys to get from this, is that, just because something says that there's a sex offender there or there's not there doesn't mean that it's conclusive. So I want you guys to think critically about this type of technology. And one thing to think about, too, is, well, if it's not achieving its goal, like we said before, what is it achieving, and is that worth keeping? So, as we look towards thinking about the rest of crime control theater, and as we dramatize crime control and make it more interesting, it's probably no greater of an example of crime control theater than the Amber Alert system, like I said. So the Amber Alert is often used improperly. You guys have probably all seen Amber Alerts at some point in time. You get them on your phone. You'll probably see them on Facebook. Sometimes on the road signs, you'll see them, things like that. It does allow officials to publicly and persuasively show how dedicated they are to child abduction situations. And so rightfully so. One of the worst things we can possibly think about as far as crime is something happening to a young child. Being abducted, being molested, things like that. And so these things should be dealt with aggressively and attempted to be resolved as quickly as possible. And so here's just a few examples of different, Amber Alerts that you've probably seen, maybe on Facebook, or it pops up on your phone, and it makes this really loud sound, almost like the hurricane alert. And then here, this is actually from Ohio, I think, but here's, an Amber Alert, on the interstate signs. And so, just a few examples of all of this. So moving on from there, one of the different things to think about is, does the Amber Alert save lives? Alerts were most likely to return the child unharmed when there was little risk of death, according to the Griffin article. But alerts were least successful in stereotypical kidnappings, abducted by a stranger who does intend harm. So it seems like they're actually effective when there's very little risk of anything happening to them to begin with. And then in the situations where they have a higher risk of being harmed, they're least successful. Typically, when we evaluate policies, we want to see that the opposite way, with something being more effective when the harm is greater and maybe less effective the other way around. Unfortunately, we tend to actually see this quite commonly when we look at different policies and things like that. So, understanding this idea of the stranger danger is important. So out of 800,000 missing child reports in 1999, approximately 45% are runaways or throwaways. So that's a lot, right? Another 40% report having benign explanations. We don't even know why. And then 7% are reported are kids that are lost or injured. Another 7% reported are custodial violations. So, what about the stereotypical kidnappings where unknown people snatch children up with an intent to do harm? Well, it's probably not what's happening most of the time. It's actually, most often, children are actually kidnapped by people that are known to them. And so very rarely are they kidnapped or taken away by people that are slight acquaintances or things like that. So 115 missing child cases out of 800,000 fit the stereotypical kidnapping case. So 115 out of 800,000 involved this stereotypical stranger, and 40 of these children were actually killed. In reference to 72,000 minors in 1999, 1 out of every 750,000 children will be kidnapped. 1 out of every 2 million children will be killed. So this is a very, very low percentage. 99.8% of all children reported missing were located or returned home. So that's a great statistic right there. That's the type of thing we like to see. Runaways can account for the majority of this 0.2%. The children that ran away from home. And then at the bottom here, the risk that strangers or even only slight acquaintances pose to children is extremely small. It is most often that children are taken, kidnapped, abducted, whatever, by someone who is a family member or a close friend. Children that experience violent victimization do so largely because of a family member, which is quite saddening, quite frankly. We want to think about this stranger, this other, this person that's, the violent criminal that would be doing these things. It's kind of hard to think that these things are actually occurring by people's family members, close friends and things like that, but that is actually what the data tells us. So the problems with the Amber Alert. So there's a few problems with it. The first one is there must be several events occurring simultaneously to save a child's life. The knowledge that a kidnapping has occurred, and then a description of the suspect, and then a citizen tip. And looking back, you guys have probably seen Amber Alerts before, right? And you'll probably see, there's an Amber Alert of a young child with an older man, and they might even have the license plate of the car. But how many of you actually write down the license plate number and then go out and look as you're going about your day for this license plate? Very rarely does it happen that way. If someone said, a gold Hummer or something, that sticks out, maybe, but, to go through and try to look for this license plate is just something that very rarely happens. And people might actually even see it or see the vehicle, but they don't put two and two together, and things like that, So this reduces the odds of actually getting that citizen tip is what they really want. And then there's the timely determination of the level of threat posed, and that can be extremely difficult. So more than half of Amber Alerts are issued for very, very low-risk reasons. And this actually leads to what we call Amber fatigue. And so if you think about it, the last time you heard a car alarm go off, did you call the police right away? I am notorious. I have an alarm at my house, and I'll get up to let the dog out in the morning. Sometimes I will forget that my girlfriend has set the alarm, because I don't usually set it at night when I'm there, but she does sometimes. She doesn't do it all the time, so I never really know when it's going to be set and when it's not. But I'll open up that back door to let the dog out, and then the alarm will go off. And I have yet to ever have one of my neighbors call the police and report, that my alarm is going off, that someone's breaking into my house. Probably because this happens, every couple of weeks or so. But, you think about car alarms, too. You see them, hear them go off so often that when do you all ever think, oh, there's a car alarm going off, I should call the police? It's very rare, and so similar things happen with these Amber Alerts. Somebody sees them, it's like, okay, there's a license plate, what can we do? Okay. And then usually within 10 minutes or so, you get something saying that they've located the person or something like that. So it kind of can make you desensitized to it occurring, similar to car alarms and things like that. And so then the third critique is that there's kind of this questionable causal model, right? So supporters of Amber Alert suggest that the faster responses lead to saving lives. But the nature and intent of the perpetrator, the most common important factor, is out of order. This should come first. What do they intend to do? Not putting it after the fact. So perpetrators who intend to harm may be more inclined to kill their victims quicker because of the Amber Alert, and risk of identification increases. So this can actually work against us. If they really have the intent to harm the child, then they might be tempted to do it faster so that they can get away from them, rather than keep them alive for longer, waiting on and be with them, which increases the probability of getting caught, which is a most unfortunate thing to think about. But it is, when analyzing these policies critically, it's something that should be in the back of our minds. So the Amber Alert system is kind of considered a little bit more symbolic than it is substantive, in that, substantively, it doesn't seem to really be having a big impact on saving children. But it does, have some sort of symbolic meaning. Suggests that Amber Alerts save lives based on the return of children taken by adults that intend no harm. Non-custodial parents oversells the effectiveness of the policy. It does maybe get, non-custodial parents to bring back their kids and stuff like that, but they're not going to harm them anyway. So that's something to think about. Still, the communication technologies and systems used by Amber Alerts are very impressive, right? They can push them out to all sorts of notification systems to get them out to everybody. So this is a good technology. I think it's interesting to see if there's possibly better ways that we can use it to notify people about things like this, and take it beyond the scope of just missing children. How else could it be used? And relaying timely crime data to people could be helpful. So, just some final thoughts and words. Is this the last time I will talk to you all this semester, other than over email and everything? So, just some things to take away from the class. Some kind of summarizing final thoughts. Most of the technologies that we've looked at in criminal justice are impressive in their scope, and they do a lot for us. There's been contributions from engineers, computer scientists, and other professions, and it'll continue to improve criminal justice as we see less lethal weapons, body armor, things like that. All this stuff is very impressive, and it's only going to continue to evolve. Once I do this for even longer, and 5 or 10 years from now, I'm going to be talking about all kinds of new technology that we didn't have now. And right now I talk about things that we didn't have 5 years ago from now. So this is interesting. But it's still, impressive technology does not necessarily indicate effective justice. As we've seen, some of these things are impressive pieces of technology, but they are just a tool. And it's how you use those tools which will determine whether these tools are effective at accomplishing their goals. And one of the things that I told you guys in the very first lecture was that we were going to really critically analyze a lot of these different pieces of technology to really think about whether they're actually achieving their goals, whether we could do without them or whether we need to keep them, or maybe we could improve how they're used and things like that. And so one of the things that we're going to have to do is continue to evaluate the effectiveness of technology in criminal justice. And so hopefully more researchers and social scientists will continue to evaluate these things and give me more articles for you all to read, which I'm sure you'll be thrilled with. Just kidding. Future students might have different articles to read than you do. And with that said, I hope that you have enjoyed the class. I know this class is much different than others, especially since you guys are reading a bunch of journal articles. For those of you that intend to go on to graduate school, I hope that you've enjoyed reading these journal articles, because you will be doing this for at least most of your graduate courses. For those of you that aren't, I think that it's a good skill to have. I think that, once you guys get past the math and the formulas, I think that you can still understand, even without understanding the statistics, understand the key findings from these things. And I think this would be important for those of you, especially those of you that go into some sort of administrative roles, maybe within the police departments or within corrections or courts, things like that, because you'll be able to look at this research and be able to say, hey, well, this research says that this is not effective when it's used this way, but if we use it this way, it will actually help us to achieve our goals. And I hope that, this will help you all to do that. And this class has been very different, and I taught it that way, and it's never had a textbook. And so, it saves you guys a little bit of money, but it also makes it for a different experience. And one thing to think about too is I tried to pick a range of topics that I thought that you all were going to think was interesting, but please be aware that this is not the end-all, be-all review of technology in criminal justice. There are other technologies out there. I'm probably, next time I teach, I'm going to add something about license plate readers, especially at KSU, because that's become such an interesting part of our parking lifestyle here. But there is new stuff coming up all the time. There are other things out there that I probably thought you guys wouldn't be as interested in, but hopefully you have enjoyed the material that we've covered. With that said, please be sure to fill out the course evaluations. I know that very few of you do that, and I do like to hear the constructive comments that you all have, especially the things that you liked, so that I can continue to do those in the future. There's things that you didn't like. If you don't like not having a textbook, maybe, I don't know, I can try to write a textbook for you, but that would take several years. Anyway, the things that have worked for you, please let me know. The things that haven't worked as good, please let me know that too. I'm also going to be distributing information on your final exam here soon, your review sheet. Depending upon when you watch this video, it might be already posted, or it might be posted a few days from now. I don't know when exactly you all are going to watch it, but please do that. And I look forward to reading all of your final papers, and I look forward to reading the last discussion board as well. So with that said, I will sign off for the last time, and I hope that you all have a good winter break, and good luck on your final exam.